Welcome to the Church Safety Guys broadcast with hosts James McGarvey, Paul Buckner, and Mike Scully. Together, they make up the Church Safety Guys. Their mission? To inspire, influence, and impact church safety teams. Join us for the next hour as we talk about all things church safety and security. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, join one of our church safety and security communities online, and share this broadcast with your church.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Sunday night broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and as usual, joined by my co-hosts, Mike and Paul. How are you guys doing tonight?
Well.
Minus a little sleep, but otherwise here.
I can't imagine why, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Mike was an unexpected guest. And I'm saying guest tonight because he wasn't supposed to be on the broadcast because I told him don't worry about coming on. Why is that, Mike?
Hey, you know what? I'm committed. So, you know what? I got that mindset, or maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment. Or I guess in this case, maybe it's a different kind of punishment, I guess. I don't know. You know, so for those in broadcast land out there that don't know, my third child was born yesterday at home on purpose, and his mom and baby are healthy. I'm a little worse for wear with kid number 1 and kid number 2 that decide to be crazy, and so that combined with a little less sleep last night. Yeah. Either way,
can't imagine why.
Yes,
I'll have to tell you sometime. My youngest daughter, when we lived in New Hampshire, my youngest daughter was born at a hospital southwest corner of New Hampshire, and I was in the middle of opening the first Target store in New Hampshire in that area. And I was one of the managers, and I literally was running back and forth between the hospital and because it was our grand opening day.
Nice.
And my wife's like, go, go, go. And all the nurses are like, you are crazy. And my boss at work is like, if you show up again here, I am going to kill you and bury the body in the compactor.
It's GO day. I mean, you have to when you're in that career.
I share something in common with you, Mike. My parents decided that they wanted to do home births. So my dad went through like the whole midwifery thing back in the 70s, and they had a total of 5 kids and 4 at home. And I don't remember this because I was very small, but my grandmother, I think, stepped out to inform us that I had yet another baby sister. 5 children, 1 boy. And to inform me that I had a third sister. And I guess young Paul Buckner looked at them and was like, uh-oh. Because I was starting to realize how badly outnumbered I was.
Yeah, this is
the rest is history.
Yep. We had our second child at home, and going into it, the very planned out risk mitigation, safety minded that I am, was not very into the idea initially. And then the reality is the other side of it is sleeping in our own bed without 17 nurses poking and prodding all night long for vitals, just because some chart somewhere says they have to, not because there's anything wrong, is a big difference. And despite the fact that, of course, that affects your sleep cycles regardless, having a new baby, we still were in our own bed. And so that was an amazing thing. So
cool.
So I don't have a cheer or clapping audio track. Otherwise I would play that for you. Paul's our audio track for things like that.
I'm good for any of that kind of stuff and dancing. So James has never found an opportunity for that routine within what we do. So I have to do it backstage.
So if you just joined us, welcome. If you're joining us at a later time on our YouTube channel, feel free to click that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. And as always, you can always visit our website to get transcripts or past info on past broadcasts at churchsafetyguys.com. And I'm going to jump right into bringing our guest for this evening, into the broadcast. Let me click here. And our guest this evening is Melissa Agnes. So, hey, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us tonight and
Thanks for having me.
putting up with our banter and nonsense to discuss a serious topic.
No, your banter is amazing, and congrats, Mike. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I
Can't
appreciate
even
it.
imagine 3, and listening to you guys talk about home birth. I don't have kids yet, so that's fascinating to me.
Happy to share, and my wife even more so if you're ever interested in it.
Thank you.
For sure. Good stuff. I have to go back to, I think, two of my younger brothers were born that way, Mike. Like, we had a midwife and stuff like that. So it's definitely a unique experience for sure.
Absolutely.
But so this evening, one of the reasons why we reached out to Melissa is Melissa has a crazy important background and history of helping folks with crisis and being ready for crisis. And I don't want to say crisis management, but she has worked for some amazing companies and organizations helping them set strategy. And so initially, when I reached out to her, she was actually on a broadcast with Simon from Worship Security Association. And I just thought that the content would be very applicable for churches. So I will throw it over to you and Melissa. And if you would just kind of go through, how did you get started in this type of field?
Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 21. And about 12 years ago, I was doing digital brand strategies. And at the time where brands were really starting to grasp social media and everybody was getting on the social media bandwagon. And the way that my brain works, the way that I'm wired is I tend to see risk. I see mitigation strategies for those risks. And then I see opportunity that stems from the mitigation, opportunity that without the risk I wouldn't have seen. And I remember the morning, so I was doing brand strategies, doing web development, social media branding, and it hit me. It was one of the biggest aha moments of my life, like that literal kind of light bulb that goes off, and like a cartoon. And it just occurred to me, I didn't understand why nobody was talking about the risk. Nobody's talking about the risk of social media, of the digital landscape, of technology in general, of the two-way, or the real-time news cycle, and the fact that everything was two-way now. It wasn't just organizations or brands talking at people, but consumers, individuals have these amazing opportunities to have platforms and have their own voice, and all of the risk associated with that. And then the way that I work, I went to those risks would be so easy to mitigate if people were actually addressing them and talking about them and thinking about them. And then the opportunity for connection, the opportunity for communication, the opportunity for emergency management, crisis communication, crisis management is unprecedented because of this landscape, right? But we have to get past the risk first. And at that moment, I didn't know up until that point that crisis management was a thing. For organizations, that wasn't on my radar, it wasn't in my realm. And it was just that click. And so I spent a solid year actually, devouring every single thing that I could on the subject of crisis management, just because it fed the way that I'm wired. And I found it fascinating. I couldn't stop reading about it, learning about it, talking about it. And I also couldn't stop wondering why nobody was talking about the new era, the way that the world was evolving. And that didn't make sense to me. And then I remember I had a business partner at the time, and I kept saying to him, there's something here. I just don't precisely know what it is yet. And it was this really, really strong feeling. And then about a year into my quote unquote studies, we had just launched the website of a real estate investment trust. So a public company who buys real estate and has commercial real estate and has investors are their primary stakeholders. And the VP called me really early one morning in a panic saying, our president's in the car with a prospective investor, a massive prospective investor. The media on the radio is reporting that one of our buildings is about to explode. It's not true. Our other investors are calling in. Nobody knows what Twitter is, but we hear that it's and this is where the rumor started. It started on Twitter, and we don't know what that is, but we hear it's a digital thing. And since you just launched our website, we're hoping you can help us. So serendipitously just called the right person in the right moment without realizing anything. And so within a half an hour, we had the media correcting themselves. We had the information streamlining to investors who were not on Twitter. And that really was where it was unfolding. And anyways, long story short, the next day, the president of the company called to say, not only had their unit price, their stock price not gone down since the day before, but it had actually gone up as a direct relation to the way that they managed the situation. And that was my, oh my goodness, I can serve. Like, this is meaningful. I have a really, natural talent at it. Let me go and see what I can do. Plus, I was so frustrated with the fact that nobody was asking these questions that I felt that businesses should be asking. And so what I did, I was young. I had no kind of marketing budget. I was not from this field. I had no network in it. So I decided to launch a blog. And mine was the first blog in the world that talked about the issues that I felt were important. And it wasn't just me talking. It was me asking questions and looking for solutions and creating dialogue. I dedicated myself to blogging 5 days a week. I did that for years. I don't know today how I did that. I really wish that I could go back and do that again. I try so hard. But that turned into podcasts, that turned into videos, that turned into a whole bunch of really wonderful crisis management professionals reaching out to me to say, we don't know this landscape and we don't know if this whole digital thing is a trend or is a fad, and we don't know how long it's going to last, but we do know that our clients need your services now, so can we partner? And they opened up a world to me of crisis management. They became my mentors, and I never stopped. And now I'm on to the next monumental, massive challenges because I'm frustrated once again with the industry. But I'm talking now because that was a long-winded story, but that is how I found myself starting to be where I am today.
That's amazing. So thank you very much for sharing that. If you go through, actually, for those of you listening at home, you can reach out to her on her website, and we'll actually post that in the links here shortly. But you've had the opportunity to work with NATO, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Defense, and a whole slew of other organizations. So for the 12 years, it must have been pretty exciting, like an exciting whirlwind of 12 years.
And finding my way. And one of the things, I don't take myself as in general, I don't take myself very seriously, but I do take the work that I do extremely seriously. Crisis is, and I mean, church safety, you guys know this, at the heart of it, when it's the worst kind of forms of catastrophic events, people's lives, people's livelihood, the environment, the economy, those are the things that society gets impacted. So it's important work. It's also, I'm an entrepreneur too. So it's there's so many different hats, right? But yeah, it's definitely been a roller coaster.
I found it really interesting, Melissa, that there's a lot of parts of background that I've gone through that kind of have interspersed through worlds that you just described. I
was thinking that thing.
If we rewind back more than a decade ago, I spoke at a cyber branding conference in San Francisco. And it was really about that whole focus of communications and where do you go from not just branding, but with the world of cyber and internet and everything, where was that going? And so that involved, I've also dabbled in emergency management. So I saw those worlds collide of that communications, that effectiveness, that preparedness to build resilience into organizations up front, so that you're not just managing on the other side, but you've already established a framework by which to execute.
It's important. So the big thing, if I may, there's a difference. So crisis ready is a term that I coined, I want to say like 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less. I never expected it to become a brand. It did become a brand. It became my brand. It became a brand, kind of legs of its own. And the reason being is that when I say that I'm frustrated with my industry or with my profession in general, is when my book came out, I knew that my book was going to be a differentiator. So my book came out in March 2018, and I knew it was going to be a differentiator because I designed it to be a differentiator. But the way that I designed it was I wanted it to be an inspiring, compelling read that drove people, inspired people, got people excited about actually taking action in becoming crisis ready. And so I'm very fortunate that I achieved that. What I didn't expect was for people to come and say, why is this not best practice? So because I didn't come from the traditional route, of other crisis professionals. I was always an entrepreneur, so I always just did things the way that they made sense to me to do them. I didn't realize how different I am in the marketplace, or my techniques, my methodology is in the marketplace. And to your point, Mike, it's, to me, crisis ready. The reason I don't call it crisis preparedness, I'll never use the term, I'll always use crisis ready, is because crisis preparedness status quo is having a plan that checks off a box that is created in a vacuum, in a silo, and nobody else typically in the organization even knows of its existence. And yet that plan is supposed to be what's going to guide you in the most critical moments of your brand's or your organization's existence. And that just doesn't work. That's just, it's not even common sense, right? And anybody who had a crisis management plan in this sense at the start of COVID quickly learned that it did not serve them. It was just,
Absolutely.
They might as well not have it.
Yep.
And so that's never been my approach. My approach when I was a consultant was always, I mandated that my clients would give me 1 or 2 people that were required to take every single step of the journey with me. So all of the interviews, and so that it's always been this transfer of knowledge. You give me knowledge of your organization so that I can help you. And then I give you knowledge about what we're doing and you learn it with me. Mm-hmm. And you own the program at the end of it. And then for me, the other piece of it is crisis ready is cultural. It's not a plan that sits on a shelf. It really is this living, breathing part of your entity that lives throughout the organization, where every single member of the team understands intrinsically how to detect risk, how to assess it. So is it an issue versus is it a crisis, for example? And then how to respond in a way where you're strengthening the trust and credibility with those who matter most to the organization. That's the ultimate goal, because crisis management is about people. Business is about people. Crisis management is about doing right by the people you serve when it matters most, when you're put to the test. So,
and this is where the world of the church safety side of things, in which all 3 of us, of course, serve, into my corporate day job, where it is looking a lot at the broader programmatic management side of things, but also going through risks, issues, racy models, and all sorts of who's accountable, who's going to be responsible for different actions across the board, not just in crisis, but in every sort of work. And so from a program manager perspective, we're always trying to mitigate or squeeze out risk, because risk has the potential to impact our end delivery date. So I think that's a very big focus. When we look at it in the church, we're certainly dealing with that risk on a continual basis. And Paul will throw it to you in the sense that we say the word Semper Disciplina around here, which is always training, in the sense that it's never something that we're ready for fully. It's something we're going to continually focus on, because every single day, to me, it's a maturity model. It's a progression of maturity, not a progression of completely ready. You're going to continue to mature over time, and therefore increase your readiness.
Absolutely. And because it's a skill set. So a crisis ready culture is mindset, it's skill set, and it's capability. And you mentioned in the governance and processes, that's capability. Skill set is exactly what you're honing, and mindset is the way that you choose to view any type of incident, right? Because the way that you view it directly impacts your actions, which directly impact the results. And the skill set facet of it, I mean, communication. Communication is a massive part of successful crisis management. The best communicators in the world continuously strive to be better, because communication from human to human is so challenging. Right. Never mind from human to the masses, or from brands to or organization to the masses, and then add emotion. Yeah. Right? When you can't beat one of the crisis ready rules, you can't beat emotion with logic. So then how do you communicate in a way where you can transfer logic? You can have logic land and give directives and lead when emotion is clouding that. These are all skill sets that are learnable, that are critical, that serve everyday business, not just crisis management, but to your point, Mike, that we constantly need to be focusing on honing.
And that comes into our de-escalation side of things we've raised before, is you have to lead with empathy in order to reach that person where they are, in order to inject that feelings and those emotions that can cloud the facts, so that you can bring them back to Logicville, if you will, and then you can actually deliver the information that you're intending.
Absolutely. And I've got a formula for that after Paul. I know.
Sorry, I'm going to geek out over here, guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to hide.
No, last week I was geeking out over Grossman. So I love this, because a lot of times we don't look at a 3D or 4D type model of church safety, and we can get stuck on physical danger, or we can get stuck on medical, which is a great place to spend a lot of time. But like at my church, sometime back, we had a guy who was identified by a police officer in our church who had federal warrants, who was known to be dangerous. He had a history of violence. He was known to carry a gun. And the decision was made to send uniformed police officers in about 4 deep and literally grab him in the sanctuary and pull him out. And I was like, and immediately my brain was thinking, and they had a plan. It was a sound plan, but all I could think is, we have a potential weapon. We have to assume there is one with 400 bodies. Maybe we can lure this guy out. And so I talked to these guys that they're professionals at what they do. My background is executive protection. So I'm a scalpel. They are by design sledgehammers. And that's what they do. And I'm thinking, a loose weapon, shots are fired. This is a live streamed broadcast. Let's mitigate this risk. We need to protect people from medical injury. We need to protect the church from legal issues. We need to protect the church from embarrassment. And we don't even want to disrupt this service. People may inject themselves into this situation. And so we lured the guy out. And then mindset, what I love is the gentleman ends up in handcuffs. Nobody gets hurt. We had prayed in the lobby beforehand, and they haul him out. Maybe 15 people knew surgically that this guy was gone. And then we were talking to the family, and a loved one had come out and said, look, I'm trying to get this guy into church. And we're like, that's great, but he's going to have to start there from a jail cell because he has federal warrants. But the church then went and ministered to the family and to this guy in prison, which biblically, literally, Jesus talks about going and visiting people in prison. And everything that you just said, this is the real world of church safety. And what you're talking about, this meshes so well, because there's a wholeness here of what is our mindset and what is our why and how do we handle this and how do we make this, not only do we still get the gospel message out, but nobody got hurt.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm getting excited.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you, Melissa, is just because kind of what Mike and Paul just said. The reality is, so often we grab that, and to your point earlier, we grab that checklist, right? And we walk through our building and we're like, okay, I checked this, I checked that. But the reality is, every day in the community, there's so many things that you can't account for, and you can't predict someone, because as a church, obviously, you serve the community, your doors are always open. A lot of times people will come in and you have to think at that moment, and you have to assess at that moment, and you have to be able to make the decision, is this a good situation or a bad situation? And then how can I address it or impact it? Do I need to and make all of those decisions? And unfortunately, a lot of times in our experience with coaching churches, that's why we went down the road of trying to help them think outside the box and just say, look, you know what, there's so much here as a possibility. It's not just about responding to emergencies when they happen, but what can we do on the front side of that to make sure that, with a social media presence, with a branding presence, with physically with the property and all those sort of things, what can we do to make sure that we're taking as much unknown factor out of it as possible? So.
Well, I think there's a time too, if we look at this from a company perspective, some companies will sit there and they'll have, I'm sure this is your world, Melissa, where the insurance company will say they need some sort of plan. And so they check that box, but again, it ends up as shelfware. And they're not stretching it. They're not exercising it. There's nobody actually tasked with reviewing it on an ongoing basis to say, have we changed so much that this plan needs to be rewritten and therefore scrapped? Or are there things here that are no longer practical to even apply given footprint of a business, footprint of a church? What is changed? And I think that's where we find ourselves trying to continually look at what we do in church and saying, how do we adapt continually? How do we evolve that it isn't simply one thing that we learn? And when we're training, of course, we're only in true crisis for us is some sort of physical threat in the church. So if we're rising to that occasion, we're going to sink to the level of our training. In this case, it's probably similar to what you're dealing with corporations with their plan. It's their shelfware, but they're even worse. They're going to sink back to probably bad habits, not
You
the
revert
plan.
to default. In crisis, we revert to default. Absolutely.
There you go.
And
So
the
it's similar.
goal, it is, and that's just it. So people ask me all the time, how is it that I've worked in so many different industries and so many different sectors? My answer is, and the common denominator across every single organization or brand that exists, from law enforcement to places of worship, homes of worship, to corporate, organizations that cater to animals, the common denominator is we serve humans. Business is about relationships. It's about serving people. And crisis management, like I said earlier, is about serving people. And, or, when you're put to the test, doing right by the people you serve. And knowing there's so much that we can know in advance if we put the time and attention to knowing it. And part of, the reverting to default is if your default is here, your baseline is here, what we do with Crisis Ready, because it's cultural, because it's a skill set, because it's a mindset, because it's capability that we can continuously augment, we're trying constantly to make cross-organization, I don't care, like every single member of any part of the team across the organization, constantly trying to elevate that baseline over time. And that's what, my book is called Crisis Ready, Building an Invincible Brand in an Uncertain World. Nobody is invincible, but when you can come through, when you can be met with any type of challenge and you can come out of that challenge with even more trust and brand equity and credibility and loyalty, with those who really matter to the organization, to me, that's an invincibility. And that's what we're striving constantly to get to that point.
Absolutely. And I think that's, of course, something that churches need or want and expect from their kids' ministries, because they're one crisis away from not having any trust of those parents, of dropping their kids off. And if the kids are the lifeblood of that organization, of making a church thrive, because you need that to continually to grow. So they're managing against that potential risk. But many churches and folks we talk to every single week, they're just starting. They don't have a team. They're not even necessarily able to convince their pastor they need one. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a great topic. And I love the idea of thinking across and thinking about how do you continually address and adjust throughout. A direct question, I guess, would be have you found or have you been able to break it down to specific metrics or measurements that you can use to track and then drive that baseline growth year over year?
So that's a great question. As a solopreneur, I was doing that I was doing it in a non kind of organized way, in a non just because of time and resources and just a whole bunch of things. I'm constantly busy. Right now, last year in 2020, I founded the Crisis Ready Institute, and I'm no longer a solopreneur. I'm trying really hard to switch gears, and that's where we're designing, we're building out different things to be able to do that. But I will say that, as frustrating as it is on so many different levels, when COVID hit, that was my true, I know the importance of what I do and I know the impact of what I do. I've seen it firsthand. I've lived it. But to see my clients, when COVID hit North America, when to see that they were crisis ready, that to watch the rest of the country or the rest of the continent start panicking when it hit, and to know that my clients 6 weeks before that had their moments of panic, had their moments of being human, and then getting past that and watching it coming and having that foresight and working with them so that when it hit, they were in the best possible position that they could be in such a volatile, uncertain time. Nice. That to me, and then that gave me, they didn't need me at that point. I was there as support, but that allowed me at the time I was a solopreneur, to then work with the healthcare front lines and to work with law enforcement front lines, which was deeply meaningful to me as a human. That to me was the validation of, and the frustration of why was the world not crisis ready, and seeing firsthand what it did for the humans that I've served over the years. And then that just fuels me. That's when the Institute was born, and I'm on a mission.
So I know why I don't sleep anymore. How do you have time to sleep? because that's a mountainous mission.
It is. And I'm learning. So one of the things for the last, 14 years, I've never really taken weekends, not truly. 2021, I've given myself weekends. I know it's Sunday evening, this is an exception, but I think I've worked one weekend this year. And that is, I need to practice what I preach. And mental health right now is really, really critical. Emotional health is really, really critical. That's another crisis within the crisis. And I'm there telling my friends, my colleagues, my clients to take care of them. I'm trying to lead by example and do the same for myself, because otherwise, and I'm already exhausted. Like, I'm on top of that, right? I'm exhausted. The whole world is exhausted right now. So
absolutely.
Sure.
Well, mental health was such a big piece during this, and it's critical to crisis ready or being ready in a church. I saw it play out over the course of this last year. It's kind of the idea of, we do this for our teams, but the idea is making sure they're fed at church, making sure they're prepared and ready mentally to serve that day, that they didn't have something going on, that they're not clouded because of perhaps a crisis of their own going on or brewing at home. And I think all of that plays out together. We're trying to make sure that they're prepared. That they're continually looking at that as a whole, because in some ways it's almost like it's the analogy of flying on a plane. Well, you're going to put on the mask for yourself first before you put it on your child. So you have to make sure your mental health is sound before you can even do a dime's bit of good for the next person next to you.
And that's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Very hard.
Yeah.
Very.
Yep.
So I'm going to jump in here, and we'll take a quick sponsor break. So don't go anywhere. We still have Melissa for a few more minutes. She can hang out with us. So thanks for watching, and we'll be right back with you.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates, your partner in service.
The worst has happened. Evil has invaded the sanctuary. Lives were ended, and the life of every surviving member of your church has changed forever. There will be funerals to attend. The grieving and the counseling will go on for years to come. You may even lose church members, especially if your pastor was killed during the attack. But what if I told you that all of this could have been prevented with the proper training? That your church could learn how to secure its campus and how to see the signs of an attack before it happens. At Shield Force International, we will teach you the skills you need to protect your church, to protect your children, to mitigate and even eliminate would-be threats to your church body, all before it happens. We can no longer pretend that evil doesn't exist, or that churches aren't targets. Attacks against churches and pastors are on the rise. Call or visit us online for a free consultation.
Even at church, bad things can happen. Medical emergencies, active shooters, predators, even domestic disputes. Is your church, is your ministry, is your sanctuary prepared? Do you have a safety or security team? Find out how you can be with James McGarvey's new book, The Case for Church Safety and Security. James McGarvey's experience and training, along with a biblical foundation, bring much needed information in today's trying times. It offers a true biblical perspective for starting, keeping, and growing a safety or security ministry in your church or place of worship. The Case for Church Safety and Security, a brand new book, includes a special foreword by Frank Pomeroy, the pastor at the First Baptist Church, Sutherland Springs, Texas, where they experienced the worst active shooter in U.S. history. This compelling book shares insight on preparing yourself and your church from potential threats with a biblical worldview. Start your journey to a more secure ministry and worship freely, knowing you're safe. Get more information now at churchsafetyguys.com and pick up your copy today. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to help inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. We're protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over the United States through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and products. Help us reach more churches in impactful ways by considering becoming a monthly ministry partner. $2, $5, $20 a month will help us continue to provide these resources.
Okay, so we are back from the break, and if you just joined us or you're listening online, feel free to click the like and subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. And we are talking this evening to Melissa Agnes, and she is with the Crisis Ready Institute, and she has a number of resources, which we posted her website on the broadcast page, so you're welcome to look that up. But she has a fantastic book, which is also available on Amazon. So I've read it, and it's awesome. Not that that's an indicator, but it's a fantastic, very, very nicely written book that would be helpful to you. So definitely check that out. And I'm going to throw it over to Paul because you had something that you wanted to add.
Well, I love the fact that we have to understand that safety is something that is always changing. And there was a day 20 years ago that a lot of churches had a church directory, and you could pick it up as a guest when you came to that church. So imagine today, most churches won't do this because of the identity theft, data theft capabilities of this. But imagine you could walk into church, pick up a directory right next to the church bylaws in the bulletin, and it had every active member. Some of them had their home address. It had their phone number. In many cases, it had a photo and especially their birth date, because you were supposed to remember their birthday. And from a data mining identity theft standpoint, or I've actually looked at situations with churches where, with voice over IP, with spoofing numbers, with being able to put anything you want across a number to say that you're from, such and such Baptist church. And then they call and they say, "Hey, Melissa, how are you doing today? Pastor James and Pastor Mike wanted me to call you real quick and say, we're doing a drive to help some kids down the street at this orphanage. And we just need about $100 from you. We take Visa." And that's happened to churches. And, I didn't know we were doing that. Yeah, they were talking about it last week when they were doing this segment on the website. You probably read about that in the email. And people fall for this, and churches have been milked for thousands of dollars. This whole world of being prepared for a crisis, this whole world of being careful has changed. And I was talking to a church about 2 years ago, and they were posting all over social media about a trip to Africa. And Boko Haram is actively seeking through social media. They're looking for hashtags and all these different materials to find out where they can kill Westerners. And it's so much more convenient if we go to them. And I was trying to explain to this pastor, I said, listen, you don't want to be doing that. After you were there, maybe, but not while you're there, and not in advance of you being there. And you're posting pictures of a youth group. Some of these kids are going to have a resale value on a slavery market. You're talking about a huge opportunity for a terror attack. Like the whole landscape of keeping ourselves safe, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's at church, or on the mission field, has completely changed. And this is, we were talking, in the messaging during the break, Mike, this is your wheelhouse. I mean, it's things like this, and Melissa, it's things like this that people don't think about that are dangers. And if we can get ahead of them And then if something does happen, we have a plan for how to handle it, especially in the media. You were talking about Twitter earlier. Something gets said and somebody twists a line that somebody said and they take it out of context, and suddenly you're front page news all the way across social media. And how do you handle it in a way that puts the fire out instead of adding fuel? So I don't expect an answer to any of that, but that's the landscape we're in today.
Yeah.
And so on that note, I think there is a little pyramid with some things in it that we were going to talk about.
That's funny.
Nice segue.
Yes.
But you're right. And I do want to say this. I want to say, because when you're saying things, I'm looking for the pyramid right now. That's where my eyes are.
Actually, I have one. So this is actually from the book.
Crisis Ready. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and it's on the website.
Yeah, it's the Crisis Ready model. But I will say, Paul, that as you're talking, I think the people with great intentions, such as, people who work and with and for churches and different homes of worship, we don't want to think about it. The intentions are pure. So it's hard to come outside of that. And it's also not pleasant to come outside of that, to think of all of the dreadful realities of the world that put us at risk that we can now be subjected to. Yep. We need to do that. But what I want to say is that it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. And I say that specifically because the work that I do, the reason that I'm so prevalent online and just I'm a keynote speaker and I travel the world to share this message, is because I'm not good at sales. I'm not going to sell or convince anybody that they need to do this. It's a very, very hard sell, in addition to the fact that I'm not going to do it. And I don't want to be met with, the reason I don't want to do it is because I don't like to convince people, right? I can share knowledge. If it resonates with you, then let's do some really great and important things together. If it doesn't, then I'm going to dispense my energy with the person that it does, because it doesn't make sense for me. The reason I'm saying that is that one of the biggest roadblocks to professionals such as myself in this industry is that people don't want to, it's human nature to not want to look at that doom and gloom. It's not pretty, it's unpleasant. Our intentions are good. Life is good right now. We don't want to look at that. And even coming out of COVID, after 15, 16 months of this doom and gloom and everything that surrounds it and is a part of it, my fear and the reality is that people are not going to want to look at it. Looking at it doesn't need to be completely negative at all. It's about understanding it. It's about being able to get ahead of it. And it's about empowering yourself and your teams, the people on your teams, to be able to, again, to even just the ads that you guys put up in the middle of the show, not being in that position in the first place, so preventing it, mitigating it. And then again, to what I said at the start of the show, there's risk, there's mitigation factors to risk, and then there's opportunity through that. And that opportunity is about connection. It's about spreading your message. It's about just creating emotional ties with even more people who relate to whatever your mission or your organization or your message is. And that's the wonderful part about what people like I do. You just have to shift your mindset a little bit and not want to block out that doom and gloom. I don't know if any of that made sense, but it's really important.
I see parallels to the pyramid to the OODA loop for folks that have listened to our show before, and we've talked about that, where there's, Melissa, if you haven't heard of that, it's a direct action, observe, orient, decide, act. So you're kind of observing, you're orienting, you're collecting additional information or background or context, you're making a decision, and you're actually acting on that decision. So it's kind of a framework by which to make quick decisions, but do so by gathering all information. So I see bits of that into this as you go through this from the bottom, auditing and having the right mindset and looking at your culture and moving up. But I'll let you speak to it because you wrote it, not me.
Yeah, it's the trajectory. So when I was writing the book, I needed to take something that I don't do in a linear fashion and make it very linear so that it could be consumed, right, and comprehended. And so I worked with a brilliant woman named Neem James, who listened to me talk for 90 minutes and helped me take all of that babble, and say, build out a contextual model, which is what the Crisis Ready model is. And the book it helps guide the book, but also it's in the work that we do. So the Crisis Ready Institute, we're helping, again, it's mindset, it's skill set, it's capability. We're teaching those things to professionals and to students and to consultants. And it's the framework that we take. So the first one is to audit, is really to understand where you sit on what I call the spectrum of crisis readiness. And that, again, is mindset and it's culture, right? So taking a look, and this is really looking at qualifying and quantifying. So you're looking at not just, where do we think we are? What does that mean? Or how protected are we? Or how, these high risk scenarios, what's our safety protocols and all of these things, but also looking at throughout the experience, throughout the last 6 months, 1 year, 10 years, anytime we've had any kind of an issue or a potential crisis, how have we responded? What has our mindset been? How have we been proactive versus reactive? Where did our fears lie? Because we're human and we all have them. And right, so really gauging where we currently sit and setting objectives into this is where we want to be into the next phase of crisis ready, and really identifying that. The understanding variables and impacts is that's the knowledge transfer. That's understanding a lot of the different factors of what it means to be crisis ready. And really, especially what it means to be crisis ready, but also making sure that you're getting the buy-in and support that you need. So because crisis ready is cultural and it's cross-organizational, it's one of the massive challenges of this role is bringing everybody on board and getting that buy-in and support from all layers in every which way of the organization. And also creating a sense of ownership and aspiration to this is why we want to be this is where we're going, these are the benefits, this is the value, and that takes a deep understanding. And so that's part of where that knowledge comes in. The next phase of that is to identify. So it's identifying scenarios, it's identifying stakeholders. I say often, you've heard me say it I think already twice, that crisis management is about doing right by the people you serve when it matters most. That's understanding your stakeholders, right? That's understanding who it is that you serve. And one of the things that keeps resonating or resounding in my mind as we're talking in this conversation is it's with churches, it's not just about the crisis that can happen to you, but it's your position as a leader within your community when other crises occur. And that's ultimately, you need to make sure that you're safe, your brand is safe, your people who come to your churches are safe. And then the step above that is who are you? Are you teaming up with law enforcement to be crisis ready with them in the event of some kind of, God forbid, terrorist attack or whatever it might, natural disaster, it doesn't have to be, right? And so that you can, because you have a voice and you have relationships that are so deeply woven within your communities that have that you're a leader, that positions you in the position of leadership in critical moments. So it's not just about when it happens or if it were to happen to you, but as a collective in your community, in your region, across your state or across, your province, if you're in Canada, you do have this really strong, beautiful opportunity and advantage. And there's third parties that you need to be connecting with outside of crisis to become crisis ready together so that you can help amplify important messages that they may need to be communicating to people who would listen to you. So that's one thing, looking at stakeholders and scenarios, like keeping that in mind. The next phase is really to go through the nuts and bolts in designing your program. So I mentioned that crisis management plan is not a term that you're ever going to hear me use, unless it's to say you're never going to hear me use it. What we do is we design crisis ready programs. And there's a difference to me in the verbiage and the vernacular of plan versus program. So plan is very linear. It's very one-dimensional. A program is cultural. A program is three-dimensional. And it's mindset, it's skill set, it's capability that permeates the organization. And it's something that is a part of you. So it's evolving with you as you evolve. So we go through the motions of designing crisis ready programs that do that aim to help build out a crisis ready culture. And then in the last phase, the pinnacle there is the implementation. And by implementation, it's what is the roadmap? What is the strategy for bringing this to that cultural standpoint? How are you bringing this to your teams? What is your training? And it's not just the tactical training. It's, we talked about communication. Communication is so critically important. There's so many opportunities. You communicate on a weekly basis, right? With with your constituents and with your community, how are you looking at those communications to really truly understand what landed and why? How did this emotionally connect, or how did we incite this reaction, whether we anticipated or not, or wanted to or not? So taking opportunities every week, every month, quarterly, yearly, to really implement the learnings and the lessons, and to our points earlier, continuously hone the skill. Simulations, going through crisis simulations on a regular basis. So there's a difference between a tabletop exercise and a simulation. A tabletop exercise is typically you're going to have leadership sitting at a table saying, what if this happens? What would we do? And there's conversation around that. And that's a great exercise. A simulation, which is chapter 9 in the book, takes you through exactly how to create a really phenomenal simulation, is not what would we do? It's this is happening in a safe, controlled environment that is not really happening. It's an exercise. This is happening. Get up and do. Let's test the program and let's hone the skills. So ultimately, and then at the end of the book, essentially what happens is that pyramid turns into a circle. It turns into, I don't know how to do this properly, because it's constantly, once you get there, then you're continuously auditing, you're identifying, you're understanding, you're refining, and you're continuously honing these skills. So very much in a nutshell, high level, that's what the pyramid is. And that's the trajectory of Crisis Ready.
Nice.
That sounds vaguely familiar, Mike. Seems like we've had this conversation before. That's all I'm going to say.
I tell you, you know what? I am so glad I have 5 weeks of paternal leave off, because I'm ordering this book and I cannot wait to read it.
Awesome.
Like, I'm a fan right here. Like, I love it. I love the breakout of the framework here, and we know we have to let you go. So thanks for coming on. This is great. Folks, you need to buy this book, because there's so much here that applies to our world, and you're not even realizing it. We couldn't unpack everything here tonight,
No
but
doubt.
this applies. We got to build this pyramid in our churches, and then we got to operate in that cycle on an ongoing basis to be crisis ready in our church.
Thank you for saying that. And I hope you enjoy the book. It's really, there's games in it. It's designed to be fun. I designed it, when I said earlier, I designed it to be a differentiators, because every book on the subject that keeps me vitalized puts me to sleep. And that's not okay, right? If it's putting me to sleep, it's not serving, and it's important to serve. So the book is meant to be a really fun experience. I was
going to ask you about that, because I didn't want to be rude and say, is it supposed to be entertaining? But I found it.
No, it's supposed to be entertaining.
I found it very entertaining from the standpoint of an immensely important topic, and yet somehow you managed to weave it into a very engaging way that most, like, when I downloaded it and started reading it, I expected it to be like, a doctorate level philosophy book or that sort of thing. And I was pleasantly surprised with the narrative and the stories and all of that stuff. So, it's definitely good.
It's taught in dozens of universities and colleges around the world. It's taught at Harvard. It's in the Pentagon. Like, I wanted people to be inspired. I wanted you to read the book, to finish the book, and to go like, yes, I can do this. Let's go do this, because we need to do it. And I'd love to invite anybody. We have about 3 months before the end of 2019. At the end of 2019, I founded the Crisis Ready community. And the Crisis Ready community, each of you, I'd love to have you guys be a part of it. Everybody who's listening, and it's designed to be a safe space where we can hone these skills together. And not just that, but you can tap into a community of wealth of knowledge and expertise and support from such diverse backgrounds and experiences. We've got law enforcement, we've got Fortune 500 C-suite people, we've got everybody, they reports to them. We've got small local organizations and entrepreneurs and business owners, all with this shared interest of, we want to be crisis ready, and we want to be a part of creating a crisis ready world, which is my mission. So that's crisisreadycommunity.com. And anybody who wants to we have so many events every month. We've got a book club, we've got masterminds, we've got roundtable discussions on hot topics. There's a lot that goes on there for
Mike's hands cramping. Mike's hands cramping over here. He's like,
he's like writing down the website real quick.
Awesome. And I'd love to have you guys on. You'd be such a value, and you'd gain so much value, which is exactly what it's all about. So
sold.
Thank you. Yeah,
Awesome.
Mike's already enlisted.
Awesome.
Fun times. Well, thank you again so much. We'll let you go, but anytime we will definitely look into that community, and we appreciate you sharing that with us because we would love to connect with you further if the discussion and opportunity ever comes up. So
yes, please. And thank you for this beautiful opportunity.
Oh,
And congrats, Mike.
Welcome.
Good luck with getting sleep over the coming weeks.
I appreciate that.
He doesn't need any sleep. He's fine. All right. So if you have joined us towards the end, we will actually upload the video tomorrow, probably tomorrow evening or tomorrow to YouTube. But you can always go back on our Facebook Church Safety Guys page and watch the video. And then you can reach out to us through our website at churchsafetyguys.com. And usually what happens is when we upload it to YouTube, it uploads to that piece as well. So you can easily access the video tonight from the website. But definitely, I will say, definitely check out Crisis Ready. It's available on Amazon, and it's a great resource, and you will not find another book quite like it. It was very well done in a narrative, and just with much thought. So don't be nervous or think it's another book that's not going to be helpful. It's definitely a great resource. So other than that, next week we will actually have on a good friend of mine, Robert Meter, Esquire, and Bob is actually an attorney in the state of Ohio, and he works for the Columbus Police Department, and he will actually be joining us, and we'll be talking about some legal concerns with churches and church safety teams, and I've had the honor of going around the country. Or not the country. Bob's gone around the country. I've had the honor of going around the state and chatting with Bob about church safety and setting up conferences and that sort of thing. And he's a great guy, extremely knowledgeable, and he's got some great resources as well. So we'll post the link for that in the next couple of days. You don't want to miss it. And then we've got a couple more broadcasts for the rest of this month. Do you guys want to add anything I'm forgetting?
Well, before we close out, so Melissa has a book that talks about changing the culture. In this case, we can apply it to changing the culture of a church so that we are prepared for a crisis before it happens. You guys have something that's coming down the pipe, something that might have to do about churches and culture.
I just want to say something real quick, and then I'll throw it over to Mike. But one of the things I loved about Melissa's book is she actually wrote management is, and I'm quoting this from her book, from her website, but she wrote, management is what happens after the negative event has occurred. Readiness is what is done to build an invincible brand where negative situations don't occur. And if they do, they're instantly overcome. And that's why I reached out to her and asked her to come on tonight, because her content of being prepared ahead of time, it seemed to me like it flows a lot with what we're always saying and stuff that we've gotten together and written about. So, Mike, I'll throw it over.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I love it, and I love where she closed out there with the fact that this goes to, it's not linear. It's not just building the foundation. It is starting there, and you have to do that in your church, and you have to have a right ministry, and you have to build that correctly. But our church security life cycle and the book that Engage, Train, Retain that James and I wrote really goes about operating your team in such a way so that you can be successful. And that is in itself is a life cycle. It's a continual process where you go through it and again mature, as Melissa mentioned, for this crisis ready framework. And so it's very similar, although also very different. So the process is the same. It's a cycle. It's something that you continually do and get better on. And it hones into how we continually say Semper Disciplina, always training. We need to always be getting ready, always be feeding the mind, always be feeding the soul. and make sure that we're investing in our teams so that we're going to continue to be hopefully ready ahead of time should a crisis ever enter our church.
And I will throw a plug out there for the book too. It's actually 506 on the Christian Church and Church Leadership Amazon spot. So it's moving up in the world. There are a lot of spots on that list, but it's moving up. So thank you to those of you that have reached out and picked up a copy. We're in the process of breaking that life cycle down. So we just released a servant leadership book, and I grabbed it. I actually have my copy of it. It's a little bit smaller. I think it's about 60 pages, but it goes through the 10 principles as a foundation for the life cycle. It goes through 10 principles of servant leadership. And we have another book coming out to address the life cycle, and we have that broken down so that you'll have the opportunity to go over that with your team. Each book has a study guide, study component in it, and questions that you can do it in a small group format with your church. But it gives you the opportunity to kind of go through and build engaging conversation with your folks to walk through those life cycle steps. So I think that next book, I think we're planning on it coming out July 1st. And then we'll have 2 more after that coming out later in the year to be announced. So I will throw it over to Paul if you'd like to close us in prayer this evening, and we'll bid everyone good night.
Awesome. So guys, I love these moments, these conversations, because there's so many aspects of things. We've talked to people who are experts on fire. We've talked to people experts on personality, preparing for things, changing mindset, changing the culture of your church. There's so many aspects to this, medical, and anybody can dive in here and get something out of the conversations we have. And that's one of the things I love. We don't only talk about one thing. And tonight was its own unique thing, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I have her book. It's on my reading list. If I don't have it and there's a specific shelf, it's about to get bought tonight. Look at that. And because I'm pretty sure I bought it when you first mentioned the name. I was like, okay, cool. I'll put it on my reading list. And
if I shared my screen right now, you would see my shopping cart.
Yeah. It might be over here in mine. I've got a screen.
I'll tell you, and like I said before, as soon as she was on Simon's show and Simon interviewed her, and we've been playing email tag since December, honestly. So it's awesome that we were able to get her on the show, because I know with COVID, she's been even more busy and had a crazy schedule. But, she has amazing background. She's done TED Talks. She's helped with the Pentagon, NATO, all of this stuff, all these Fortune 500 companies, et cetera. And so it was a real honor to have her come on. But as soon as I saw her book, I was like, you know what? I'm interested. And I started reading it and seeing some of her dialogue with how, she really does. It's not normal crisis management stuff. It's like thinking outside the box and presenting in a way that fluctuates with the culture, which is what that's what we strive to do. Like we strive to influence and impact folks with the understanding and knowledge that, this is a living, breathing thing. It's not static. It's got to change because our culture changes and things that happen change. But yeah, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, Kindle, download.
Nice.
So
That's great.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you have the time. And it's written in a way that it's not 12th grade or college level material that's you can disassociate with. It's very engaging. She has stories and scenarios in it, and probably one of the best books that I've ever read on that topic, without a question. So I would, if you're listening to this at a later time or tonight, I would encourage you to grab a copy of that and definitely go through it. So
that's one of the coolest things about the time we live in. Is you can listen to a podcast or a TED Talk or read a book, and there's a potential for an idea to change the mindset of an entire generation. And I don't know, outside of the Word of God, I don't know a time in history where an idea could have such far-reaching impact as it can today so quickly, and can save a life or change things so quickly. It's a neat time to live when it comes to that. So on that note, unless you gents got something, I'll pray us out.
Good.
No,
All right.
go for it.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, I thank you for tonight. I ask that you would bless Melissa with what she does, that you would guide her message to the right ears, that it would change cultures and protect companies and entities and houses of worship. Lord God, I thank you for this interview tonight. I ask that it would reach the right ears. And Lord God, I thank you that as the three of us, you bring us to the table with different giftings and different interests, Lord God. And tonight was a night that Mike could really sink his teeth into, Lord God. And I thank you for moments like this, for his new little one at the house. I ask that you would guide, bless, and protect his family. And Lord God, I lift up everyone listening tonight, that you would not only protect their body, but help them to grow not only closer to you, but closer to each other, and build that team within their church that's ready for whatever comes. We lift up tonight to you in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So thanks for joining us tonight. Again, if you have any questions or would like to reach out to us, feel free to do so through the website, churchsafetyguys.com. Last week, we had the honor of having Colonel Dave Grossman come on, and it was a great conversation. Probably one of my favorite broadcasts out of we're almost up to 80 now, believe it or not.
It's so hard to pick a favorite because we've had so many.
It is. We've had some great folks on, but it was definitely a good one that you don't want to miss. So you can go back and listen to that on our YouTube channel. That's the easiest way. Just type in Church Safety Guys. Our resources are available on Amazon. Just type in Church Safety Guys, and that comes up. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to miss next week. We have, for the first time, we have an attorney coming on, and a great guy and a great Air Force veteran and a personal friend of mine. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And without further eloquence, we'll bid you all good night. Mike, go get some sleep. Have a good time off with your family.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll talk to you next week. Take care. God bless. Have a good night.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Looking for ways you can help us reach more churches? Share our broadcast with your teams. Consider becoming a monthly ministry partner. Like and share our page and join the discussion in our Facebook groups. Visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for other great resources. Remember to keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.